Sure. All right. Okay. Hello all. Good morning or good evening, based on which part of the world you are joining from. So, welcome to this webinar on automating, building, testing, and deploying SharePoint framework solutions with Azure DevOps. So, quick introduction of me, myself, Nanddeep Nachan, and I have been working with SharePoint, Office 365, and Microsoft Azure since last 14 years. So, mostly my work is in SharePoint. Here are some of the books I have released on SharePoint platform, and then on to the right hand side, some social handlers to get connected with me. Okay, so the agenda for today is we will have a look at the new stack of SharePoint development. What are the new tools or modern technologies available to develop SharePoint framework web parts? Then a quick introduction to the Azure DevOps. Then how we can build and develop or build and deploy a system using Azure DevOps for SharePoint framework. And then we will quickly touch around how to create the unit test cases and get those executed as a part of Azure DevOps. And then we have three major demos. First one is to see how we can use DevOps for normal SPFx solutions, maybe a SPFx web part, and then how we can extend that solution to use it as an Microsoft Teams app built with SPFx. And then the last demo will be for library components, which is the newer released functionality from SharePoint framework. Okay, so then starting with the new stack development available for SharePoint framework. So it was like we will start comparing each of the tools which was available onto the server side and compare those with the client side development which is supported with SharePoint framework. So this will set up as a platform for us so that when we will start using DevOps, we will have clear understanding of significance of each of the tool in DevOps. So first one is Node.js. So earlier in the server-side development days, we used to host our applications onto IIS Express or IIS website. So now that we have something called as Node.js, which is a open source JavaScript runtime, and it is used to build and run the applications which are equivalent to the .NET. And then SharePoint framework supports Node.js version 8.x or 10.x. So for example, if you are using the latest version of SharePoint framework, then you can go ahead and install Node version 10.x. The next thing is about NuGet. So NuGet was used to download the custom packages to our Visual Studio solutions. So the replica of that what we have in client-side development is NPM. So NPM stands for Node Package Manager, which installs the modules and its dependencies to our SPFX solutions. And then these packages can be installed globally using -g symbol, or even it can be installed locally to our SPFX solution. And all of those installed packages goes inside node_modules folder. Then we have MS build, which was used to build our code or build our solution. So the same way we have gulp available in the client-side development, which automates the SPFX development and deployment task, which bundles and minifies the JavaScript and CSS file, and it run the tools to call the bundling and minification task before each build. So basically it just compiles your LESS or SAS files to the CSS file. Also it compiles TypeScript file to the JavaScript file, because on a browser cannot understand SAS or TypeScript file, so it has to be converted to CSS or JavaScript file. So gulp carries out that particular task. So gulp is again equivalent to what MS build holds the significance in the Microsoft server-side world. So it just helps us to compile, bundle, and copy the files to the deployment folder for packaging. The next thing what we have is TypeScript, which is maybe equivalent to C#, what we used to use as a language for developing server-side code. So in the client-side development, we have something called as TypeScript. which is a strongly typed language. Even we can say it is as the superset of JavaScript, which adds compile time syntax and type checking for JavaScript, and it helps to build the applications which will be then compiled to a clean JavaScript code. So for the development in SharePoint framework, we mostly use TypeScript. Then lastly, we have something called as Yeoman. So earlier, in the case of server-side development, we used to use Visual Studio, and whenever we used to click File, New Project, Visual Studio represent us with various templates which we can use to create our solution. So the same way, Yeoman gives us that flexibility so that we can create uh, a solution maybe for SharePoint framework, Office, or even for Teams. So this Yeoman relies on to NPM and Gulp, and it can be called as a scaffolding tool for all the modern web applications. And it is used as a SPFx solution generator and builds the required project structure for our SPFx solution. So Yo is the command line utility for creating the projects. So for example, if you want to create a project for SPFX, then you will hit a command called as yo @ Microsoft/SharePoint. So this was about the basics, like what are the tools that we need for setting up the SPFX solution. Then quickly we will see like how the development life cycle of SPFX is, so that we can map this entire cycle to the DevOps. So the first thing is we require to install the SharePoint generator. We install it using yo Microsoft/SharePoint. We create one web part using that command, and then it gives us scaffolded project which has many TypeScript and SCSS file. Then we edit that particular web part using Visual Studio Code, and then we test out the web part by making the modifications. Then firstly we test that on a SharePoint local workbench, and then we work it on a SharePoint hosted workbench to make sure it is working fine. And once we go through this entire cycle of development, we go for a packaging and deployment to the SharePoint. And then we test all the web parts on client side, classic as well as modern pages, so that because SPFX supports rendering on both classic as well as modern SharePoint. Then if it is ready to ship, we deploy all the assets to the CDN, and then we ship it to the production. Okay, so this is the life cycle of SPFX development, and we will follow the same life cycle when we will try to deploy, build the solutions using DevOps for SPFX. Okay. Yeah. So firstly, the demo of SPFX web part which is created. So I have one very basic web part created in SPFX. One moment, my pointer is entirely frozen. Okay, right. So this is the web part, and this is created using React.js. Probably firstly I will show you how the web part looks like. So this is how the web part looks like. It shows the hierarchical structure based out of SharePoint list, or if it is working on local workbench, then it shows the static data. So this is the basic SharePoint framework web part. In a code, I can quickly explain it as inside this render method, we have something called as check for the environment type. If the environment type is directly from, or for example, if this web part is running inside SharePoint, we are showing the data from SharePoint list. Otherwise, we are just showing the data from mock service. So if I go quickly to the mock service, this is how it looks like. It just gives the static data back to SPFX web part. And for example, if this is hosted onto a SharePoint, in that case, it connects to the list which is given as a parameter or web part property to the SPFX web part. And then we get the title, ID, URL, and other columns from the list, and we show it as an hierarchical structure for our web part. So this is the basic web part which we have created as of now in SPFX. And our intention throughout this session will be that we will try to build and deploy this particular web part uh, to SharePoint using DevOps. Okay, so let's quickly talk about this Azure DevOps, or maybe just DevOps in general. So DevOps is a set of practices that automates the process between software development and the IT teams in order that they can build, test, and release software faster and more reliably. The concept of DevOps is founded on building the culture of collaboration between teams that are historically functioned in relative silo modes. So the DevOps is a kind of a firm handshake between development and operations team, so that emphasizes a shift of mindset for better collaboration and tighter integration. So DevOps unites the agile, continuous delivery, automation, and much more to help development and operations team to be more productive, more efficient, and innovate faster, so that they can deliver higher values to the business and customers. So in this particular aspect, Azure DevOps help us by having something called as Azure boards, wherein we can track our activities, track our all of the tasks which we are working on. Then we have something called as Azure pipelines. Again, we can probably divide this into two types. One is the build pipeline and one is the release pipeline. We will look into both the concepts later on, but at least as of now, it supports Azure pipelines. Then we have something called as Azure repo or Azure repository, which help us to uh, act as a repository for our code, so that we can commit our code changes to it, and even we can get the code and make some modifications to the code as a repository from Azure. Then we have something called as Azure test plans, which we can use to test our applications against few of the test cases. Then again, we have something called as Azure artifacts, which can help us to share the packages between continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines. Then, for example, if we want to build something which is not out of the box supported with Azure DevOps, then we have something called as Marketplace, which is available maybe as a out of the box offering from Azure, by which we can download any of the third party packages for free or by paying the amount to them. So here, maybe I can show you quickly how it looks like. So here we have something called as Azure boards. So this is the board where we can keep track of all of the activities. And then this is a nice board view, which help us to track the activities to their closure. Then we have something called as Azure repo, which help us to check in, check out the files, track our commits, push, and even from here we can create our branches. Then we have something called as Azure pipelines, wherein mostly we use build and release pipelines throughout this session to create the builds and deploy it to SharePoint. And then we have something called as this test plans, where we can create the test plans manually and run them after each of the build. Then we have artifacts available here, which can be used to share between CI and CD pipelines. So this is how practically each of these concepts look like. Then we will come to the basics of how or what kind of activity we are trying to achieve from this particular session. So again, on a higher note, like implementing these SharePoint framework solutions is very much easy. However, maintaining the SPFx solutions for their integrity as they grow is always challenging. So when an SPFx solution is being worked on by a team or a considerable size, and it undergoes continuous development efforts, testing, and deployment. So each of these tasks becomes very much hectic or very much used task. So again, setting up the continuous integration and continuous delivery help us to automate this process, so that we can automate the continuous deployment, continuous testing, and continuous packaging. So the scenario what we are going to work now is that we already have this SharePoint framework web part available to us, which we just saw this one. And then this particular web part we already have checked into Git in a um, in Azure. So even I can show you that how it is. So if I go to the repo, so here I have this particular web part already checked in here. Okay. So what we will do is using Azure DevOps. That means using build pipelines and release pipelines. Internally, we will use something called as Office 365 CLI. So Office 365 CLI is a set of commands or set of APIs which uh, which help us to have an interaction with Office 365 apps and services, as well as have an interaction with the SPFx solution. So using those Office 365 CLI, we will try to deploy this SPFx web part to our SharePoint online site or Office 365. So this is the scenario which we are trying to build. So firstly, we will talk about the build pipeline, so which will help us to increase the quality of the release. So for here, this build pipeline, we can consider it as a continuous integration. So it is the process of automating build and testing of code when developer commits changes to the source control. Because what happens is like whenever a developer makes any of the change and check it to the source control, first thing what we have to make sure that that particular code is building properly and we are able to make an artifact out of it. So the artifact could be a zip package, could be a WSP package, or at least in SPFX solution, it could be a SPPKG file. That means the package file for SharePoint framework. So using this continuous integrity or continuous integration, we can achieve the improved productivity of a developer team because at the end we know the goal what we are working on, that is the ultimate package which we want to deploy, and then we can have the predictable results. So the predictable results could be that particular package which we are looking out for. There may be few of the unit tests which we are running on result of those unit test cases, as well as maybe any of the files which we are tracking to be available at some point. Then it also ensures that we have a constant quality by running those test cases, as well as making sure that particular package gets created without any errors. And once we have this continuous integration in place, we will have a reduced number of bugs, because every time we will ensure that our code works properly and it is able to build and create a package out of it. So it will help us to have early detection of bugs, and then using this we will be able to make early release to the market. So these are few of the advantages of setting the continuous integration. So one more thing for continuous integration is that we do set up build pipelines. So all of these pipelines are or can be created using JSON or YAML definition. So YAML is kind of a new concept in build pipeline. So YAML basically denotes like we can have indentation based format of or indentation based sequence of commands which can be executed in a sequence. So when we will see the demo, we will go through how the YAML can be written. But as of now, there is no UI available to write the YAML. We will have to do it manually. So these build pipelines can be created using JSON or YAML, and then we have a web-based edition available to create this build pipeline. So we don't have to deploy anything to our server or download any of the things to the local. We will be able to do it in a browser. And then again, this build pipeline supports integration with many of the third-party components. So for example, if you are working or your project demands integration with other third-party components like Sonar Cube or even Jenkins, in that case, we will be able to make use of it as a third party. And the next thing is auto updates of agent. So each of the build has got associated agents. So since this is a online version of Azure DevOps, So all of those agents get automatically updated. So there is no downtime required, or we don't have to invest any efforts to make agents updated. So all of those agents will get updated by default. Okay. So then again, coming to the agents, we have two types of agent. First one is a hosted agent, which is provided by Microsoft out of the box in Azure DevOps. So we can go ahead and readily use those agents. Or the second type of agent is a private agent. So that particular agent we will have to create on our own, install, and give it a hosting environment. So mostly for the SPFx solutions, these hosted environments are sufficient. But for example, if you want to go beyond what is offered by an hosted agent, in that case, even you can create your own private agents. Okay, so then we will go to the practical of how we can create the build pipeline for SPFX solutions, and then what are the major components involved there to have this build pipeline created. So the first thing is we will create a new build definition, and then we will follow each of the steps. So when we will go through each of the steps, I will explain the significance of having each of these step in a build pipeline. So let's have a look at the demo. So from here, Azure DevOps, we can move to the pipelines. And under the pipelines, we have basically two major pipelines, build and release. So what build does is it gets all your code from the source control. It compiles that particular code and then create an output. In this case, SPPKG file, that means the package file for SharePoint framework, and it uploads that particular package file to a drop folder, which later on can be used by this release pipeline to deploy to SharePoint. So the so the uh, point that we want to achieve with build pipeline is that we should be able to compile our code, and then we should be able to create the package out of it. So for this purpose, I will show like how we can create the build pipelines. So once you are to this build tab, you can click new and start creating your new build pipeline. So first thing is that we need to connect to the code. We need to give the answer like where our code is located. So there are out of the box connectors available like Azure Repo, Bitbucket, Git, and any of the other public Git repository. So right now, since our code is in Azure Git repo, I can select this. And even you can notice that it was supporting YAML. From here, we can select the repository under which our code lies, and then from here we can start configuring our build pipeline. So there are some out of the box available templates which we can choose to get started. For example, Node.js or Vue.js, they may be best suited for SPFX solution. Otherwise, if you want, even you can click this show more and create the plain simple or no code kind of an build pipeline. So I will go back to the pipeline which is created already. So I will click on edit to show this pipeline. Okay, so the first thing is that this particular pipeline has got this agent associated with it, and the responsibility of this particular agent is to run all of these tasks which are associated with that particular agent. So the first thing is how we can assign a task to agent. So under each of the agent, we have this plus icon, which help us to add a task to that particular agent. So once we click plus, we will have a set of tasks which we can add to this particular agent. Uh, Again, all of those tasks are further divided into categories like build, utility, test. For example, if you want to directly search out for the tasks which are helpful for build purpose, or which are helpful for tool purpose, and sorry, deploy purpose. And for example, if you want to go something beyond this which is not out of the box available with the Azure DevOps pipelines, in that case you can click this marketplace and you can download any of those third party tasks to your build pipeline. So for example, if you want to use Sonar Cube, you can get it for free and add it to your build pipelines. So to add this task, what you can do is, for example, if you want to add an npm task, you can just search here for npm. It will list out all of the commands or all of the tasks starting with npm, and then you can just click on this add button so that it will add that particular task. And then for each of these tasks, we have got properties like display name, command which we want to set. So these are all the parameters that goes to that particular task. So with npm, what we mostly do is we can install the packages, we can publish using npm, or for example, even we can build our uh, custom command with npm. So this is how we can start adding the task to our agent. So as of now, I will remove it and we will go through this each of the tasks which are available. So if you still remember the first slide which I shown, like what are the tool chain available for SPFX solution. So the first one was Node.js, which provides the running infrastructure to your SPFX solution. So since this particular web part was created using SPFX version 1.9.1, which is the latest available at this time, it supports using Node 10.x version. So for that purpose, we have included Node task and with specific version of 10.x. Even if you can specify 8.x, if your SPFX solution is developed with some lower version. So here, firstly, that we have Node.js installed. The next thing what we do is we need to download all of the packages which are responsible for that particular web part packaging. So again, all of these packages are specified inside package.json. So if I move back to our solution, we have something called as package.json, which records all of the packages which are required to be in place for this particular web part to work on. So here, these are the list of packages which are required by this particular web part to run. So this particular npm install command will download all of the packages from the npm repository. So for that purpose, we have included this npm task, and as a command, we are giving it as an install. The next thing is that npm requires an location of package.json file. So for that purpose, we have a parameter here, and from here we can specify where to which folder our package.json lies. So since it is at the root of our SPFX web part folder, the path provided is the root. And then, for example, if you want to play around with some other advanced properties like logging and all those things, even it can be enabled from here. So the next thing is test. So since we were talking about npm test, we will quickly talk about the testing. So again, testing is a kind of important phase of software lifecycle, and it should be a part of continuous development and deployment in order we can achieve better results. Again, SPFX is no exception to this scenario. And as a part of SPFX solution development, we should have supporting test cases to test the functionality independently or as an regression testing. So having significant test cases can help to develop newer functionalities by ensuring the integrity of existing functionality. So for this particular SPFX web part, we have created test cases using Jest and Enzyme. So for example, if I move here, we can see that this particular test command has been changed so that it can use Jest. So Jest is again an npm package which you can download by using npm install, and then it will be downloaded to your SPFX solution. So here we are modifying the test behavior of our gulp so that whenever we will run gulp test, it will this Jest configuration will run, and then it will run all the test cases. And then we have something called as test watch, which will watch all of those test cases. Then at the end we have a specific jest configuration for the reporters, so that it will help us to generate the test reports, and all of those test reports will be available under reports directory. So quickly I will show you, we have a test folder here and we have some test cases specified. So these are very simple test cases, probably even we can call them as the unit test cases. So it will just check that whether our component is doing something and it will return true. And the second test case will just add two numbers and give the expected result back. So this is just to show you that how we can write the test cases to the SPFx and then how we can run it from our DevOps. So this particular npm test command will fire this particular npm test behavior, and it will run all the test cases for us, which is specified in this particular test um, test file. And then the next thing is that we want this particular test result to be published so that we can review all of the test cases which are successful and which are failed, so that we can take an action upon the failed test cases. So for those two reasons, we have npm test and the publishing of test results here. The next thing is we are packaging and bundling the SPFx solution. So for that, we have these two familiar commands from SPFx available. First one is gulp bundle with ship parameter, kind of an release parameter, so that it will bundle the SPFx solution. It will minify all of the JavaScript and CSS files. Then the next thing is we need to package our solution so that it will create the SPPKG file. So the outcome of package solution is always a SPPKG file. So from here, we are creating that SPPKG file. The next thing is that once the SPPKG file is available with us, what we need to do is we need to copy that particular file to a drop folder. So each of these build pipeline has got a predefined drop folder which we can use as an intermediate location to save the output of our build pipeline. So for that purpose, we are copying the file to the drop folder, and then we are publishing that particular drop folder so that our release pipeline will be able to locate this drop folder and work upon those artifacts to deploy it to SharePoint. Okay. So with this, we have our build pipeline ready. What we will do is we will click Q so that it will run, or at least this agent will run through all of these tasks, and it will create the package at the end. So I will just click on run so that it will run this particular pipeline. So first is that it will wait for an agent to be ready, and once it is ready, it will, okay, the agent is ready now. It will initialize that particular job, and then right now it is getting sources. That means it is getting all of our code from the repository. Once it gets all of the code from the repository, the next thing that it will start running our task. So the first task was installing Node.js. So right now it is installing the Node.js to a container. So what happens is whenever we run this build release, every time it create a new container inside which it will run all of the tasks which are associated with that particular build pipeline. So every time it will be a blank container, and on top of it we are running all of these commands. So firstly that it has installed the Node.js. The next thing is that using that Node.js we will download all of the required npm packages which were specified into our package.json file. So again, one thing to note here is that depending on the number of packages we have in the package.json file, this particular activity will take time. So for example, if I go back to our package.json, we have at least these many dependencies available. So it will connect to the npm repository and it will download each of these package one by one. So depending on how much package do we use in our SPFX solution, this activity is going to take the time. So now even you can see that for this particular npm install, it has already taken over a minute. So it might take 1 minute 30 seconds or so. So let's wait for this activity to complete. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, so the npm install is done. It has installed all of
Hello.
the packages. Yeah,
Yeah, this is Vivek. I just want to ask you, like, when we create the new pipeline in the Azure DevOps, so every time we have to set up this agent for each new
yes,
pipeline.
we'll have to. Yes, we'll have to.
Okay. So suppose if okay, okay, and suppose we are working as a team, okay, and we set up the pipeline for one of the project. So for the other team member, it is not correct. So they can directly push into the pipeline, so that deployment will be happening. Correct.
No, this pipeline is common to all. So once you check in the code,
Common to all. Okay.
any of your team member will check in the code. This pipeline can detect that code, download, and run your task on top of it. Okay. So
Okay.
right now,
So
so
basically, we
hmm,
are
hmm,
looking. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Nice.
yeah. Okay. So right now that it has downloaded all of the packages, then it has run the test cases. It has published even those test cases, and it has bundled our package. Then it has packaged or created a package solution out of it, and it has copied that particular SPPKG package to a drop folder, and then it has published that particular drop folder, and right now it is doing all of the post activities. So one thing we can see here, like if we click this artifacts and click the drop, so it will show us the contents of drop folder, and here we can see we have the SPPKG ready, which is the final outcome which is desired out of any of the build definition. Okay, so the next thing is summary. So from summary, we will see like how much time this uh, particular test case or particular build pipeline took, how many test cases were passed, how many failed, and then output of this particular build artifact. So again, if you go to the test tab over here, you will see the test result. Like it will show how many test cases are passed and how many are failed. And then from here, you will be able to take action upon the failed test cases. So right now we have this SPPKG ready with us. The next thing is that we need to set up a release pipeline by which it will be able to deploy this particular package to our SharePoint site. So for that, I already have one SharePoint site here, and this is the app catalog for that particular site. So I will just refresh so that we will be able to see that we don't have any artifacts here or any package deployed here. So what we will do
Nanddeep,
is we will move.
sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt. Sorry, one question. Actually, you just build that particular repo, right? And it created an artifact in the drop
correct.
folder. So
Mhm.
what if we have any images attached to it? Like sometime happens, the web part also consists number of images, or it is been calling from some CDN or that kind of stuff. So is there any specific task we need to add to the build, or the same task will work or create an uh, a final package including all those images also?
Yeah, first thing is that we never include any of the images to the SPFX web part. They has to be externally referenced. We just mention the URL to the SPFX or the images to the SPFX solution. And the next
Hmm.
thing is, for example, if you have any of the other things which are responsible to be included in your package, then it should be a part of your build. So that, for example, right now we are just running gulp bundle. If you have
Hmm.
any of those other tasks, then this build command which you are writing here is responsible, and the build pipeline is only responsible to run gulp build. and then in
Okay.
that case you are responsible to package everything inside your SP package solution.
So if at
Okay.
all we have some CDN paths and all, this will work, right?
Yeah, this will work because at the
Okay.
end, even when you are creating a package, you are running those commands, right? And then those all those CDNs will get
Hmm.
included to your package. So the same way, this build pipeline will just automate the work for you. It will not create or it will not do any work on behalf of you, but it will just run this set of commands which are available out of the box, and then you will be responsible here to add your custom logic.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the next thing is that we will move to the deploy, where we will automate all of the things to take the package from build and deploy it to the SharePoint environment. So yeah, as I said, it takes the package from build and deploy it to the designated environment. So we'll see like what environment means by. So the first thing is that it is built onto the same technology as of the build. So even if you see the build pipeline and release pipeline, they look like a same. The second thing is that we have a notion of environments. That means we can create or mimic kind of an environments, maybe development, pre-production, production, so that we can use them for our deployment purpose. The next thing is that we can have approvals. So for example, if we have added our package or deployed our package to the development environment, it works fine there, but we cannot safely assume that it should work fine onto the production environment. So it has to go through some approvals. So we can set the approvers there, and from there it can be deployed to the production or pre-production or any of the other designated environments. Okay, so then we will again jump to the demo of how we can create the release definition. So at least these are the quick steps how we can set up the release definition, but we will see it in a demo. So again that just before starting, I will again refresh this particular apps app catalog so that we right now see we don't have any of the app being deployed to the SharePoint side. So the next thing is that I will move to the release pipeline, and from here we will be able to create a new release pipeline. So the objective of release pipeline is that it should take the artifact from a build pipeline, which we can select from here, and then that particular artifact should be deployed to a stage. Each of the stage represents an environment. So for example, if you click add, here you can set up your own environment. So you can add multiple environments which represents the stages or which represents your ultimate environment as a development, pre-production or production. So I already have created one release pipeline, and let's go to that by edit. So this particular release pipeline takes the artifacts of the previous build pipeline, and then it deploys all those artifacts to the development and production. So for development we have 8 tasks. Again, production we have 7 tasks. So that just to notify that even we can set up the build differently for each of the environment. Again, if I click this icon here, so it gives the triggers. So that means how do we want to trigger this particular release pipeline. So in this case we have it manually, but even after release, that means even after the build pipeline has run, we can set this release pipeline to work. And the next thing is approvals. So for example, if you want to have some kind of an pre-approvals, we can specify the name of those persons who should approve this particular build. And then we can also have something called as gates, wherein we can define the gates to evaluate this particular build before we deploy to the environment. So at least these are the settings which are available as an pre-deployment to any of the environment. And from here we can create a number of environments whichever we want. So firstly that we will move to the tasks which are associated with each of these agent. So again, the same thing, we can click on this plus sign and we can add the task here to run as a part of that particular agent. So again, this will create a new container. For that purpose, again, we'll have to install Node.js. So again, we are using 10.x, the latest version of Node. Then here we are installing the Office 365 CLI. So as I said, Office 365 CLI will help us to, or it provides us the commands or APIs by which we will be able to connect or perform some operations against Office 365 or against SPFx solution. So we will make use of this Office 365 CLI so that we can, within just 1 or 2 lines of code, we'll be able to connect to SharePoint and we'll be able to add and deploy our solutions to SharePoint. So this particular step will just install the Office 365 CLI. So the next thing is connecting to the SharePoint app catalog. So here, whenever we want to deploy this particular package to the app catalog, we will connect to that particular SharePoint site as to the app catalog. So for that, we have a script here called as Office 365 login. This is the predefined script from Office 365 CLI, which will connect to that particular catalog. It will use the authentication as password authentication so that we can specify the username and password. So here we have got something called as variables. So in this variable section, we can use our own variables so that those variables can be a part of our deployment or release pipeline. So one thing is we can probably use a variable as a global variable like a release, or the other thing is that we can create this variable or specify values for this variable which are dependent on each of the stage or each of the environment. So for example, I know that the app ID for my particular web part is going to remain same uh, irrespective of to which stage or to which environment I'm deploying. So for that purpose, we have this as a constant or a global variable. Again, I know the sites are going to remain same in both the environments. For that purpose, we have this as a global variable. So the next thing is the password, the tenant, the usernames, they are going to vary. For that purpose, we have this as the local variables to each of the environments. So this is how we can make use of variables. So here we are using those variables here like username. So for example, if this particular task is um, running for development environment, in that case, it can pick up the username of a development environment. Otherwise, it can pick up the username variable of the other environment under which it is running. Next thing is that adding this particular
Uh, Nanddeep, sorry to interrupt. The previous, can you go to the previous one? The O365 login that command. Maybe a basic question. This happens in, from a security perspective. Instead of username and password, does it also support token-based authentication?
Yes, it also supports. So you'll have to see the
Okay.
documentation of Office 365 CLI. It has many other ways to connect to Office 365. Okay, so
Okay.
you
Okay.
can
Thanks.
refer to Office 365 commandlets. Okay, thank you. Then the next thing is adding a solution package to the app catalog. So here again, basic command Office 365 SPO add, and then we can specify the path to our package file, which was into the drop folder. And then if the package is already available, we can override that particular package. The next thing is deploying this app to the app catalog. So we already have added this particular app. Now that we want to deploy this app, so then we can do is Office 365 SPO app deploy and specify the name of the package and the app catalog URL so that it will deploy this particular app to our SharePoint site. The next thing is that once it is available at the app catalog, we want to be it available at the site under which we want to use that. So for that purpose, we already have connection to our SharePoint app catalog. We will get all of the apps which are available or which are installed in the app catalog, tenant level app catalog, and then we will specifically look out for that app which is our app. So this, in this case, this is the title of our app, and then we will install this particular app onto our SharePoint site which we want to use. And once this particular app is available to our SharePoint site, the next thing is that we will add that particular web part to our SharePoint site using this particular command. So here again, we have this adding this particular web part to a page, um, to this particular web URL. This is the name of the page which should pre-exist. This is the web part ID, and under which column you want to add that particular web part. So this is the entire release pipeline, which will help us to pick up the package from build and deploy it to the SharePoint site. So I will just click on create release so that it will create a release pipeline. Create, and from here, okay, it has already created the release pipeline. Here we can specify to which environment we want to deploy, since it was manually triggered. So I will just click development so that it can take that number 73 release, and it will deploy it to our development. So right now it is in progress. Again, it will wait for agent to be available for this particular job to run. We can maybe click refresh here to see the status, and once the agent are available here, it will pick up all of these tasks and it will run those tasks. So okay, so the agent is available now. It has initialized this job. Now you can see that it is downloading the artifact which was available inside our drop folder, and this particular artifact or the SPPKG file will get deployed to our SharePoint site. So even if I go back to our SharePoint site, hit refresh, there won't be anything, because right now it is still installing node modules. It will install that Office 365 CLI, and using Office 365 CLI, it will connect to our app catalog and deploy that particular package to our SharePoint site. So this might take again some time, because these are set of ALM APIs which help us to connect to Office 365 and perform the task. Okay, so okay, let it run.
Hi, Nanddeep. Thank you for the release pipeline and the development pipeline details. I have a question related to the deployment. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hi. Okay. So consider this is pretty basic development or pretty basic web part where it doesn't need any consent as such, right? So in case if you are using any graph APIs inside our web parts, right, then it requires the admin consent in our SharePoint tenant, right, before we can deploy it to our site collection. So will it? I'm sorry. How is it managed in CLI?
Yeah, means as I said, Office 365 CLI gives all of those capabilities to connect to the Office 365 and performs all of the things. So if you refer to the Office 365 CLI documentation, it has got all those steps. So these are the documentation, and yeah, here you will be able to see all of the commands. Okay, so even they have commands by which you will be able to give all these consents to your app. So you just have to specify which kind of consents required, and then your SharePoint site, and then it will give the consent to your SharePoint app, so that under that app, it will be able to make a calls to all of your graph APIs or any other third-party REST APIs.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay. So we have this release pipeline succeeded now. So if I move back to the SharePoint app catalog, we can see now that this particular app is being added here. So what I will do is I will go back to a SharePoint site, and we should have this app available here. At the same time, you can see we also have this list created, which was available as a asset to our SPFx web part. So now if I move back to the page, so we should also have the web part added to the page, which was the last step of our release pipeline. Okay, so this release pipeline was able to connect to our app catalog, deploy the app to the app catalog, then deploy that particular app to our SharePoint site, and even add the web part to our SharePoint site. Okay, so this was very basic. Now that we will see like how we can use this Azure DevOps so that we can add the Microsoft Teams app to a SharePoint as well as to the team site. So here I will move to the solution which is created for SPFx for Teams tab. So this is the very basic solution. It will just try to get the context of team, and if this particular web part is running under the Teams context, it will show these values which are pertaining to team. Otherwise, if it is running inside the context of SharePoint, it will display the values which are specific to a SharePoint, and then all of those variables have been used inside this DOM element so that it will display the information of team or SharePoint site. So for that purpose, again, if I move back to the build pipeline, which was specifically created for this particular teams. So here, if I edit, so one thing to note in a teams, like first thing that we need SPPKG file, which can be deployed to a SharePoint site. And second thing is we require a zip or manifest which can be uploaded to the teams so that our teams can locate the SPFx web part and run it. So again, if I move to the build pipeline, probably I will just queue this pipeline first just to save the time, and then I will explain it one more time. So let it run. I will come to the build section again, and I will edit this Teams build. So here again, we are installing Node.js version 10.x. We are installing all of the required npm or node modules. Then we are using the simple commands gulp bundle, gulp package solution to package our solution. And then once it is ready, we are simply copying that particular package to the drop folder. So this is okay, or kind of set of commands which we should follow for SharePoint. The next thing is that we should have one zip or one manifest which should be deployed to Teams. So for that purpose, if I move to the solution again, and if I show the Teams, here we have this manifest which is responsible for creating a tab inside Microsoft Teams so that that particular tab can connect to our SPFX web part and show the information. Okay, so this is the manifest for this particular web part file. So what we are doing in the build pipeline is that we are just zipping these three files so that it will create a manifest which later on can be deployed inside Microsoft Teams app catalog. And once it is ready, we are publishing both SharePoint package file as well as Microsoft Teams zip file or manifest file to the drop folder. So if this would have run, okay, let me refresh. So once this particular build will run, the output of this will be two files. One is package file for SharePoint, and then one will be a zip or manifest file for Microsoft Teams. Okay, so the npm install is done. It is bundling and packaging the SharePoint framework solution so that at the end we will have SPPKG file. Now that it has even archived the uh, manifest file for Teams, and if I go to the artifacts now inside draw folder, we should have two files. One is for SharePoint, one is for Teams. Okay, so what we will do is using the release pipeline, we will copy this particular or deploy this particular package file, SPPKG file to SharePoint, and we will deploy this particular manifest to Teams. So for that purpose, I will go to the release pipeline, and then for Teams, I will click edit. So again here, maybe I will run this first so that we can save the time of running this particular release, and then again we will go through the uh, run. So okay, it is running now. So the job has been queued. So we will have a look at this release pipeline. So again, simple release pipeline. As usual, we will have to again install Node.js here. The next thing is that again we are making use of Office 365 CLI so that we can install the Office 365 CLI. After that, we will take that particular SPFx file from a drop folder and we will deploy it to a SharePoint app catalog. So for that purpose, we are using Office 365 CLI commands. Firstly, to log in to the SharePoint site, then connecting to the app catalog, and then deploying this, adding this particular app to the app catalog and deploying this particular app to the app catalog. So we have skip feature deployment attribute of deploy, so that for example, if this particular app can be deployed as a tenant wide app, it should be able to deploy because this particular Teams app should be available there as a tenant deployed app. The next thing is we'll have to deploy the app to Teams. So for that purpose, we are again connecting to the Office 365 and then we are getting all of the apps which are available inside Teams. And if our Teams app is already existing inside Teams, we will just upgrade that particular app. Otherwise, we will add that particular app. So by this, we are just connecting to the Teams and adding or updating the app. And then next thing is that we are installing or upgrading the app from the app catalog to the SharePoint site so that that particular web part will be available to SharePoint as well as to the Teams. So right now it is still deploying. Meanwhile, I will open my Teams application. Okay, so right now it has deployed the package to the SharePoint app catalog so that if I move back to SharePoint app catalog, we should have two packages here. Yeah, so this particular package is being deployed for Teams. Okay, it is still okay. Now that even it has deployed this particular package to the Teams, so if I move to the Teams, okay, I already had pre-configured this particular tab. So here we can see that particular web part. Again, if I move to the manage team section of this particular Teams, under apps, we should be able to see that particular app. Oh, so someone is snoring onto the mic. Okay. All right. So if I can move back to the general channel of this particular team, so we have this particular web part showing the information from Teams. And if let me see if the build has completed. Okay, so the build is completed. If I move back to the SharePoint site and try to open up the page which was created for Teams, okay, the web part is not added here, but if I edit the web part, edit the page and try to add the web part which should show the Teams information or the SharePoint information, this is the web part which is responsible for it. So let me publish. So from here, if we can see both the web parts side by side, we should be able to see that these are two same web parts, but it is showing the different information based on to the context under which it is running. So this same web part is running under SharePoint context, so it is showing the SharePoint information, and this one is running under the context of Teams, so it is showing all of the Teams information. Okay, so yeah, so that was about Teams. We are already running over the time, but quickly in next 5 minutes I will cover how we can set up the Azure DevOps pipeline for SPFx library components. So library component, this is a new concept in SharePoint framework released with 1.9.1. Earlier it was available with 1.8.0 as a beta, but right now with 1.9.1 release, it is generally available. So yeah, so we will see how we can use the SPFx component with library. So firstly, a quick look at the solution, which is for library component. So we have two solutions here, independent SPFX solutions. First one is SPFX library. So it is the library component which can be independently versioned and deployed through the tenant type catalog. And then the next is the consumer web part. So it is the SPFX web part which will consume the above library. So if I move back to the library, here you can see that we have two basic methods created for this particular library. One is name to return the name of the library, and the second is get random number to just return the random number between 1 to 100. And from our web part, we are consuming this library. We are creating one instance of that particular library, and inside the render method return, we are just calling methods on those particular instance so that we will be able to consume those methods from library. So let's go to the build pipeline, how we can create it for the library components. So we have this build pipeline created for library component. So again, this particular build pipeline has got one thing or one difference, how we create those build pipeline for the uh, other scenarios. So first thing is that we have one catch for this build pipeline. So there is a difference in the mechanism of how libraries consume from local and from the tenant type catalog. So for example, if you want to consume the SPFX library for local testing, okay, as I go through this, maybe I will queue the build to save the time, and we will have one more instance of build open for our library. So yeah, so coming back to how to consume the library for local testing is that firstly we'll have to run the npm link from the root directory of the library solution, so that it will create a local npm link, which is kind of a symbolic link or symlink. And from the root of the web part, we'll have to run the npm link and name of the library, so that our web part will be able to consume the library component. And for example, if you want to consume the SPFX library from tenant type catalog, in that case, we will have to deploy that particular library package as the tenant wide inside our tenant type catalog. And secondly is that webparts package .json should refer that particular library in the dependencies section. So just for this purpose, in the library consumer web part, I have created one package.json file, which we will replace once our web part is, or once our library is available inside tenant. And this particular section of dependencies assume that the library is available inside the app catalog, and then we can consume it from here. Okay, so with that background, if I go back to the library component, firstly we are installing node.js, we are running the npm install, we are running the build and bundle and package solution for our library component, and then we are running this npm link, so that it will create a symbolic link for our library. And once it is ready, we are packaging the solution for our library component, and then we are running npm install for our library component, and then we are consumer web part component, and then we are running npm link, so that we can link this particular library to our web part. And then once it is done, we are copying our uh, the file which was created as an intermediate file, which assumes the library is inside the app catalog. We are copying it back to our solution, and after that we are running again bundle and package solution, so that we can package the consumer web part, and then we are copying the files to the drop folder, and then it will be available for our release pipeline. So if I again move back here, we should have the npm install is still running. It might take some time. Okay, But library component is a newer concept, so that if you are not yet use the library component, I will maybe encourage you to use the library component so that you can understand what is mean by npm link and how it creates the symbolic link between your web part and the library. Okay, let me refresh. Okay. npm install is still taking some time. Okay, until the build pipeline is running, probably we will move to the release pipeline for library. So we'll just click edit so that we can edit this particular release pipeline. And here again, same thing. We are using Node.js 10 version. Then we are installing the Office 365 CLI so that we can use those commands to directly interact with the SharePoint and SPFx solution. The next thing is that we are deploying the library to the tenant time catalog as a tenant wide. For that purpose, we have skip feature deployment here. And then we are deploying the consumer web part to the app catalog. And then after, we are upgrading the web part if it is available already as a part of app. Otherwise, we are adding it. So, okay, so now that this particular section is ready, if I go to the drop folder of artifacts, here we can see we have two packages. One is for library, other is for consumer web part. At the same time, if I or okay, maybe before that, I will schedule a release so that even it can take that package from build and it will deploy it to our SharePoint site. So it is queued, let it run. Yeah, meanwhile, I will go back to the app catalog of a SharePoint. Right now, we just had two packages. Now that we should have four packages. One is for our library component and one is for our library consumer. So once this particular release pipeline picks up all of those packages from a drop folder, we should be able to see those there. One thing to note is about the tenant deployed. So we had deployed our Teams solution as a tenant deployed. The same way we will also deploy the library package as the tenant deployed, because all of the library packages should be tenant deployed, and we will not deploy the web part as the tenant deployed because we want to be get added to each of the SharePoint sites separately, and from there we can consume. So let us check the status one more time. Okay, it is still installing the Office 365 CLI. So once it install the Office 365 CLI, uh, it should be able to connect to the app catalog, add all these packages to the app catalog, and then the library package as a tenant deployed, the consumer package not as the tenant deployed, and then we will add that package separately. So now that it has to the last stage of installing the app to the app catalog, if I move back to SharePoint site app catalog, we see that we have these library solution, yeah, which is here, which is tenant deployed, and then we have a consumer solution here which is not tenant deployed. So if I move back to a SharePoint site, if I move to the library consumer, here we should be able to have a web part or add a web part which can consume the library component. So if I refresh this, okay, the web part is not here, so I will add it quickly. And here is the consumer web part, and then I will republish this particular section. So now that we can see that this particular web part is able to make a call to the library which is inside our tenant app catalog and get the data from the library component. So if I quickly go back to the code which is for our library component, if I move to this React component, which is getting the information from library, you can see that we have these two statements from where we are consuming the library. So these two statements are here, that it is able to connect to the app catalog or connect to the library component and get the data. Oh, sorry. So here you can compare that it is getting the data from tenant wide deployed library. Okay, so with that we have covered all of three demos. Sorry for rushing very through for the library component. We didn't had much time, but okay, the conclusion is like we should set up the Azure DevOps for our SPFx solution so that we will have a lot of time saved for using the automated deployment and automated builds, and then we can track the consistency of the build, and then we can also run the automated test. And with all of these things, we can increase the quality by maintaining the integrity with the uh, previously available features. And with this, then even we can save onto the money. So here are a few references to get started using Azure DevOps, Azure DevOps services, and mainly how you can use Azure DevOps with SPFx. So yeah, with that then, thank you very much for joining this webinar, and see you soon again. Kasam, over to you.
Thank you, Nanddeep.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Have a nice week. Bye.
Yeah, same to you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Nanddeep.
Yeah, bye. Thank you.